Hey everybody, Brian here, aka Steampup. So for today's random project, a friend reached out. They want some little jackknife holders made out of leather, and they also wanted them inscribed with initials because they are a gift. So I'm making 2 of them, but I'm going to show you how I go through my process. I've never done this before, so I'm going to figure it out. So whenever I work on a project, I always start by kind of drawing out what I'm thinking. This helps me to gather my thoughts, put them on paper, and also give me a bit of a visual reference to kind of come back to when I'm feeling stuck or unsure about maybe a next step or the overall process. So I think I'm going to use this. It's a piece of decking. What I'm going to do is cut this out. That's going to be the molded piece for the leather. This will be the bottom, and then that's kind of essentially like the bottom, and then this is that open part. So what I need to do is cut this out. I'm going to sand it all, shape it so it's rounded, and then I have to attach this, I guess, to a block similar in this size. I'm going to slide this over top of it all and clamp it all when the leather's wet. So we'll see if that works. If not, then back to the drawing board. So I have all these pieces now. This is going to be kind of the shape of the leather that gets molded around it. I've rounded all the edges. This is going to be the base, so I'm about to glue and brad nail this to here to hold that in place. And then essentially this is like the piece that gets clamped over top of the leather after I wet it. And it's just going to sit like so. And then that's kind of my jig to mold the leather. So I'm going to attach this piece, let the glue dry a little bit, and then wet some leather and see how it works. Okay, so I cut a piece of leather, essentially the same size as all of this set up here. So I'm just gonna soak it now. Get it nice and wet. Okay, now I'm gonna pull it out. Just let it dry. And then I should be able just to put this on here and just kind of work my way down. Flip. And I'm going to use the clamps to slowly walk it down. It's in there. I'm going to add a couple more clamps. Ooh. Well, that sucks. That cracked right there. I'm just going to clamp across that crack and pretend that did not happen. So I'm just tightening these all really tight. So that looks pretty good. It's all flat inside there. So now I'm going to let this dry. So I am going to release these. That actually turned out pretty good. Look at that, cool. So what I'm gonna do now is I will cut my strip that's gonna be the flap that wraps around this way with a clip there as a molding test, trial, winging it. That looks pretty good. So what I did now is I just cut this out. I've got quarter punches here, so I just used a quarter punch for the round edge, and then I just trimmed it with a blade flush. Letting that other one set there, and now I can start working on the back strip. So essentially what I've created now is this piece right here. Okay, in the art of winging it, I just basically took this, traced it onto a 2 1/8 inch wide strip that I cut. So back to back. If the edges don't match up perfectly, it doesn't matter because I'm gonna sand them, and then I do a little bevel on all these edges before I burnish them. So it looks kind of cohesive when it's all done. And then I just eyeball measured it and thought, okay, well, I want a flap to come around about like that. And then what I did was just freehand eyeball cut this curve, took the little scrap, flipped it the opposite way, cut that curve, and I'm going to trim the edges using this little tool here. And essentially you just run it along the edge and it trims off the excess. So when you burnish it, you get a nice rounded edge. So I have to put the snaps in here. I'm gonna hand stitch everything, so I need to map out where I'm gonna punch, and I'll use the diamond punches to punch my holes in pre-stitching so that I'm not going crazy with an awl and messing up my stitch. I also am going to do stitching all the way around here as well, just to have a nice sort of finished, cohesive look. And I have to figure out the back belt strap, so that's next. The nice thing is I can use this as my template for the next guy, so the next guy is a lot easier to prepare. All right, I'm not gonna sand these too much. These files are perfect for doing your edging, especially with this veg tan leather. You can just sand stuff down and shape it a little bit, get off little inconsistencies. But like I said, the second one was a lot easier to make because I used the first one as a template. So I've got these done. I'm gonna work on the belt loop part, let the second one dry in the little vise thing that I made, and then pretty soon we can start assembling them. So I have to figure out where the snaps are gonna go on this. A lot of this stuff I just do visually, just eyeball it. I don't get too technical, you could. So I'm just kind of putting it together like so. Looks about right. I think visually it makes sense to have the snap right about here. So I'm gonna make a little mark, just make sure that that's my center, and then I'll punch a hole for the snap. And then I will line that up and punch a hole and put the snap bottom on there. So I'm just gonna punch it, and I've actually put both of them together, line that up, and punch. There we go. So because this is veg tan leather and eventually it's gonna start darkening, kind of like my wallet here, I think these sort of brass snaps will look pretty sharp with that. These snaps are called line 24 snaps. I think that's the sizing. Anyways, I've got dies for top and bottoms. So you just poke this through, place it in here, stick your top on there, and then you just line it all up and oops, pop it on. And there you go. So now put the bottom snap on this guy. I closed it, like I put the thing on and closed it, and it actually made a mark where it should be, so that makes it easy. So I punched a hole, put the bottom in there. These little top pieces actually just pop right up inside there. Drop this on there, and then you just press down. Boom. Easy peasy. So for the belt loop, I'm keeping it pretty simple. It's just gonna be a strip kind of like that. I'm gonna hand stitch it on the top and bottom with a saddle stitch using my stitching pony. And my nice little touch here, I've got my Steampup logo, so I'm gonna stamp that right into there. Just a little self-promo on this stuff. There we go. Yeah, I got this made, just found somebody on Etsy or AliExpress, I can't remember. And then yeah, it just punches in your little logo. I've got a couple sizes depending on the projects I'm working on. Okay, so I've got my holes punched. I used a diamond punch, so now I'm gonna hand stitch them using this. It's a little stitching pony that you sit on, and it just helps hold your work while you're stitching. There's a little trick here also that I'll show you for threading your needles. So you put your wax cord through the eye here, like so, and then I always push it through so that it loops back on itself like that, and then you just pull it all the way down and back, and essentially that creates your little loop. So there you go, that's the little belt loop stitched on there. So I let them dry for a day. They look pretty cool. The leather's kind of recolored back to the original veg tan color. And what I did actually was I just glued the edge all the way. So now what I'm gonna do is punch all my holes with my diamond punches and then just hand stitch them, and they're essentially done. I'll just have to burnish them. So I punched through the heavier leather, and now what I'm gonna do is map out the width using this little tool here, and I can measure that and then do a mark all the way around here so that I can continue the stitch, because I want it to be continuous all the way around just for aesthetic purposes. So holes are punched. So now I'm going to hand stitch it all, and then I will sand and burnish everything. Okay, I got it all stitched, looks pretty cool. A couple things to consider is where you're starting and stopping your stitch. So I put it on the bottom side because you're gonna do a bit of an overlap, plus cut your thread and snip it and burn it off. Also stress points, so there's stress points here. So what I did is double back while I'm stitching, so this ends up being 3 thick, so that holds that in place. Third thing to consider also is the length of your thread that you're starting with, because you don't want to start stitching here and then run out of thread right there, have to switch back and then start a new line, because you're going to get a bit of a thicker thread there and it will affect the overall look of it. It looks a lot better if you can just keep going all the way, start to finish in the same spot. So now I'm going to sand and burnish the edges, get them all polished up, and then we're basically done. I just have to burn in the insignia and send it off. Well, overall it's looking pretty good, just kind of buffing it up, giving it some shine here. So that's basically how you make it. Essentially, we made a knife holder. Belt loop, approved. So the final step to these knife holders is I want to put the insignia on. So what I've done is printed off different sizes here. I'm just going to cut them out and figure out which one fits best. And then basic rudimentary transfer, I'm going to rub some pencil on the back of this and then tape it on top of the leather, and you just trace it really carefully onto the leather and it will leave a little bit of a mark, enough for me to see where I need to burn into. So again, very rudimentary, but you can see it now has a mark there, enough for me to see, and it doesn't mar up the leather too much. You don't want to mess this up because it's kind of a one-shot deal. So that being said, I always do some test burns with my burning tool. You know, I'm gonna do a couple little tests here, make sure I don't screw it up, because as soon as I start burning this, it's done. And if I mess it up, then I gotta rebuild this, or at least this portion. I don't wanna do that. Okay, not gonna lie, it's always anxiety inducing to do that, especially on a finished piece. Sometimes I'll actually make a patch and then sew the patch on. That way if I mess the patch up, like, oh well, just make another one. Anyways, pretty good. And that will just age nicely, and the leather's gonna get nice and dark brown and have a nice patina. So this one's done, gonna do the other one, and I will package them up and send them off to my customer. Thanks for watching.